So hello and a warm welcome to this edition of NGG's Australia-India Conversations. Today we have with us His Excellency Manpreet Vohra, India's new High Commissioner to Australia, to explore the growing India-Australia relationship, as well as understand from him the opportunities and factors that could consolidate the Australia-India bilateral ties further. His Excellency Manpreet Vohra commenced as India's High Commissioner to Australia in April 2021. He joined the Indian Foreign Services in 1988 and since then has been Ambassador to Mexico and High Commissioner to Belize, Ambassador to Afghanistan, Ambassador to Peru and Bolivia. High Commissioner Vohra, welcome to NGG Australia-India Conversations. Pleasure to have you with us today and looking forward to a freewheeling conversation.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure as well. Thank you for the opportunity. Delighted to speak with you and through you to a wider audience.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Vohra, I might just start our conversation off straight away. Our audience would love to hear a little bit more about your journey as a diplomat for India over the past 3 decades. And what were your highlights so far?
Gosh, you know, that'll take me down memory lane and remind me how old I've become. But as you've already introduced me, I have been ambassador now in 4 countries, along with accreditation, concurrent accreditations from Peru to Bolivia and from Mexico to Belize, and now also from Australia to Nauru, one of the Pacific Island nations. It's been now a 33-year-long journey. I joined the Foreign Service in '88, started my career in Hong Kong, learned Mandarin Chinese there, then went and lived for 4 years in China, served there, then went on to Mongolia. Then I was back at headquarters, looking after disarmament and international security affairs, arms control, nuclear matters. Then I was the economic counselor in London for 3 years, followed by a deputy high commissioner first in Kenya, Nairobi, and then deputy high commissioner to Pakistan in Islamabad. After that, I came back to New Delhi and I was involved with a major project to set up the South Asian University in New Delhi, which was a SARC project, a project of the member countries of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. And then I went to Peru, came back, went to Afghanistan. Then I was back in Delhi, and during these periods back in Delhi, I looked after development partnership administration, which is about doing developmental projects and lines of credit projects, etc., worldwide. And then I have been in charge of consular, passport, visa sections, counterterrorism, as well as administration in New Delhi. But now, then I went to Mexico, and from Mexico, I came straight here to Canberra. So my 10th overseas station overall.
Wow.
A fantastic journey. You asked me how it's been. I don't think I could have asked for anything better. And when I wrote the civil services exam and chose to join the Foreign Service, I must say there's absolutely no regret. I'm glad I chose this service. It's an honor to serve the country, represent a nation of 1.3 or 1.4 billion in the way diplomats do. So it's been very, very, very good.
Wow. Wow. What a journey. What a journey. If I was to ask you for, I mean, this is going to be a very tough question, may I say. If I were to ask you for, 2 of your most sort of best, foremost highlights so far, what would they be?
Well, that's a tough question. Part of that answer is easy. If you ask me about my best professional experience, I don't think anything can match my time in Afghanistan as the ambassador there. Nothing before or nothing since can quite match that, because that was quite literally a unique experience, a unique zone to live in, a unique set of circumstances to deal with, and a very unique partnership in our neighborhood for India. If you ask for me about it personally, then it's a much more difficult question, because I've really enjoyed many, many countries that I've lived in, including the new one that I have now arrived in, Australia. The lockdown hasn't allowed me yet to see Australia in any great extent, but I hope that that will be a short-lived hiatus and I will be able to move around.
Absolutely. Look, very, very sad affairs in Afghanistan, and I feel for the people of Afghanistan at the moment. And I hope things do change for the better sooner rather than later. And as for the country that you're in, I personally, not being biased at all, probably the most, best country that I've lived in. I've had a similar sort of journey. I was born in East Africa, grew up in London, and then came to Australia. So I can certainly say that Australia is by far the best country I've lived in.
It is a very fine place. I'm privileged to have been selected to come here, and sinking my teeth into the job right now, which is quite intense, as you can imagine, with the way our relationship is deepening and expanding, with the way our leadership is meeting all the time, with the amount of formats and groups and groupings that we meet in. It's really nice to be here.
Absolutely. You've arrived at such an amazing time, and we're so delighted to have such an experienced diplomat with such vast variety of experience in so many different countries, not only overseas, but also in Delhi. So that to me is a very big highlight, knowing that we've got a senior diplomat here who's going to look after India's interests. So we're very happy with that. But also over the last 2 decades, the relationship, probably longer than 2 decades, the relationship for me has always been a bit of a roller coaster ride. Australia has experienced many different leaders, I think 7 over the last 11 or 12 years. So diplomatically, it hasn't been that stable. Today, we see a stable government where we can actually have proper dialogue. And as you can see, we've progressed quite well with that. And for me, as an NRI living here, promoting the Australia-India relationship, the time has never been better. And so I think we're really on a wonderful path. On that note, having recently taken over as India's highest ranking diplomat in Australia, what were your early thoughts when you were informed that you will be India's High Commissioner to Australia?
Well, it was one of immediate excitement because by that time, and this was sometime last year when I was informed about it, I was in Mexico at that time. And the fact that the Indian-Australian relationship was growing so rapidly, we had just upgraded it to a comprehensive strategic partnership in June last year. The fact that the Quad had started working, the fact that Australia and India had already begun to see eye to eye on a large number of things, the fact that our trade and investment relations were growing, but even more importantly, promised a huge potential. All that was well known, at least amongst us diplomats and to I personally. So when I was asked about this particular assignment, I was very, very excited, and it didn't take me any time to say yes.
Wonderful. And with regards to where India stands today, India has acquired a significant place in the changing global paradigm. As a diplomatic and an economic level, how should the changing new world order view new India, in your opinion?
Well, I think there needs to be a much closer understanding and appreciation and an acknowledgement of the new India. The fact that we are today quite significantly different from what we were in the past, perhaps for decades in the past. We need to appreciate the fact that we've made quantum jumps in our business environment, in how we approach issues, foreign investments, foreign investors, how we have cut out red tape, how we have vastly improved the ease of doing business, how innovation is the massive story coming out of India today. How we have uplifted our middle classes particularly, and the huge domestic market size, the consumption within India, how therefore it is a great place for investments, particularly not just for the Indian market, but today also as an important base or a hub for global exports out of India. So in many ways, I think some of the old biases are still persisting amongst sections of, let's say, industry or businesses. And that needs to be now shed. Any notions that India might not be such a easy place to work in. I think that needs to be shed. Greater attention needs to be given to India, and I am confident that whoever looks at India, spends some time on India, will be very pleasantly surprised at our new India's environment and the amount of growth opportunities that we offer.
Absolutely. You mentioned the Quad. What's your own personal take on the renewed interest in the Quad alliance? And we're aware that the Quad leaders meeting is happening at the moment in the US, and of course, the focus activities in the Indo-Pacific, which is, I guess, now emerging as a new epicenter for economic and strategic gravity. It'd be interesting to get your views on that.
Well, Quad is not an alliance. You use the term alliance. It's a partnership, really, of 4 countries, which are all in the Indo-Pacific and have major interests in the Indo-Pacific, which itself, you yourself just explained, is perhaps the fastest growing, the biggest engine of growth right now, and perhaps for well into the future. So a hugely important area of which all 4 countries happen to be a part of. All of them happen to be large democracies. All of them happen to be market economies. They therefore happen to have a great congruence of views on what our region should be, how it should develop, proceed further, how and what are the challenges facing the region, and how those challenges need to be overcome. So with that sort of shared interest and shared objective, we have tried, the Quad is trying to pull in the capacities of each, and each of these 4 countries do bring in quite unique advantages, and therefore put together the synergy is massive. So we are trying to do that, get together and do things, good things for the Indo-Pacific region, provide alternate options on what we could do here for the region together, and of course bilaterally with various countries, and also how and what we can do along with other partners besides the Quad to ensure that our region, the Indo-Pacific region, remains open, peaceful, secure, stable, inclusive. The international order, the rules-based order continues over here unchallenged. That is really the motive, the raison d'etre of the Quad. And there's quite a bit that we are now trying to do. As you know, there has been an intensification of the meetings of the Quad. This year, in fact, we are now seeing 2 summits of the Quad. First one in March, which of course was virtual, but now one tomorrow on the 24th in Washington, which is, today over here, tomorrow in Washington, 24th, which it will be the first in-person meeting. And they've already in March decided that they need to focus on a few issues, all of which are relevant very much to the Indo-Pacific region and to the various countries in the Indo-Pacific region. 3 or 4 broad areas, in fact, somewhat specific areas that were identified in March. Vaccination, COVID-19 vaccines being one of those, and the agreement that the Quad countries will pool in their resources, their manufacturing capabilities, etc., to deliver 1 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines within a year or so to the Indo-Pacific countries, that we would work together on climate change, and because that is something that is quite existential in some cases to some countries in the Indo-Pacific, that we would also work on critical and emerging technologies, because that is important. Technology holds the promise for the future for all of mankind. All the challenges that we face can, in my opinion, be dealt with majorly by science and technology, by solutions that improve our condition. So there are quite a few specific areas where the Quad leaders have decided to pool their resources and focus on. There will probably be, certainly will be a reiteration, I think, of those issues when they meet again in a few hours' time. And it is possible that they might also decide on announcing a few other initiatives. Let us wait, for a few more hours and see how it goes.
Seems like you know something we don't. I just wanted to shift the conversation through to just the Australia-India relationships now. It's believed that both countries are likely to ink an early harvest deal by the end of this year. What has changed in the outlook of both countries for each other? And the fact that the CECA negotiations has been pending for a long time, what kind of explains the renewed energy between the two countries?
Well, the CECA negotiations sort of halted, as it were, because it was overtaken by the larger grouping, which was the RCEP. And then negotiations got subsumed under that rubric of RCEP. But then India decided that it didn't make sense for it to join RCEP at that time, under the way the RCEP agreement was coming up. And so we did not join it, following which there has been a renewed interest in resuming or reopening the bilateral negotiations with Australia. As far as Australia goes, of course, Australian government and Australian officials would be in a better position to explain it. But it has been stated quite clearly that Australia is keen to diversify both its export markets as well as its import sources. There is great potential that Australia sees in India with the Indian growth story, with the Indian market. And therefore, there has been an interest from Australia as well. And going forward, it seems that besides the mutual interest, there is also a mutual agreement now to do this quickly, as it were. Trade negotiations often take a very, very long time. But I think because of the complementary nature of our two economies, and the fact that it doesn't look too difficult to be able to decide that ABC makes sense and can be resolved very quickly. So there's an agreement now, or at least an announced intention of the ambition that we could perhaps conclude an early harvest agreement, an interim trade agreement, as it's technically called, by the end of this year, and then carry on with more negotiations for a full comprehensive economic cooperation agreement, a full CECA thereafter. So the negotiators are meeting quite regularly. The trade ministers are speaking and writing to each other quite regularly. Minister Dan Tehan is about to visit India next week and will further discuss matters with his counterpart. And so I think there is both the realization that this makes sense and the ambition that we perhaps need to move quickly on it, which is what is happening right now, which is the stage we are at right now on the negotiations.
And it's wonderful that both prime ministers are also, providing full support for this early harvest agreement, which adds volumes to both the trade ministers in doing what they must kind of do to bring the economic ties closer together. So that is a very positive piece of information that we've received so far. And I do hope that Minister Tihan's visit next week and the AIBX, the events that are happening around that, the business activities, have a large participation from both Australian and Indian businesses.
Indeed, when everyone is on the same page, it does help matters. And yes, both prime ministers are solidly behind this effort right now to enter into and conclude these negotiations.
And also the advent of bringing in the former Prime Minister of Australia, Mr. Tony Abbott, as a special envoy for the Australian Prime Minister, added volumes and also sent a very strong message to India, as he has warm relations with PM Modi.
That's quite right. Yes, he certainly has a very good relationship. He knows India very well. He obviously knows his own country very well. And that knowledge, that experience, and the relationships all help. And so we were happy to receive Minister Tony Abbott back in India. And the discussions were very, very good. And that has certainly, I'm sure, added to the effort to achieve something quickly.
Absolutely. Keeping on to the business tone, perception has affected engagement, and it's a tough one with that. You discussed this earlier on in regards to New India. What will be your advice to Australian companies wanting to expand operations or invest in India today?
Well, I would say just devote a little more attention and time on it. Do study it closely. Do visit India. We are open, of course, for anyone coming in. But as soon as it becomes possible, do visit India. See for yourself. Meet your partners that you want to work with, be it for trade, be it for investments, joint ventures, whatever. And you will be pleasantly surprised. So, do not go by the past. Do not go by any prejudices or old notions that you might still be harboring. Pay attention to the new India. And as I said earlier, you will be pleasantly surprised.
What role, over the last sort of 2 or 3 decades, the government has really played a good role, and the relationship has been very strong from a G2G perspective between India and Australia. There's always been a lag by the business sides. We've sort of started to push a narrative of Australia's strengths supporting India's aspirations. And I think that's a really good start, because when you consider, looking at India, what India needs, what India wants to do, the young India, the new India, there's a lot of strengths that Australia has outside of just commodities, which it can bring into the equation. What other roles do you feel that the government can play in getting businesses interested?
Well, you are absolutely right. There is a sort of a 2-track speed between the G2G pillar and the B2B pillar. I completely agree that business has on this side, the Australian side, I can perhaps safely say that they've been so engaged with and happy with exporting their resources to perhaps just one large market, which was able to take up everything that they had. Perhaps, they got a bit complacent, about the need to do anything much more with any other market or any other new destination or country. And therefore, perhaps, they haven't really been that focused on doing more with India. Perhaps on the Indian side, of course, there are sterling examples of certain sectors of Indian industry being very focused and doing a lot with India. The IT sector, for example, is is one very good illustration. Most Indian major IT companies are here and here in a big way. Tens of thousands of employee headcount, and these are good, high-paying jobs for Australians created by Indian companies and their investments over here. But other than that, perhaps other sectors, except again the resources sector, where they might have been interested in acquiring mining assets, etc. There could have been a certain amount of complacency that Australia is too far, perhaps Australia is too small a market, and perhaps to an extent even some impressions that Australia may not be a terribly easy place to work in either. And so that has led to a certain amount of suboptimal B2B engagement. So I absolutely agree that it is an area that needs to be energized, as it were. We need to do much more as, of course, governments and high commissions, and it is always my effort to bring out this the story that the opportunity of doing more with each other is vast. It is immense. I tell Australian businesses to look at India, and it's a good place to make good profits, to find alternate markets and very large markets as well. But I also put out the suggestion that just don't look for, trade alone. And certainly don't look at working in India or with India as a 100-meter sprint. Look at it as a more endurance, longer distance race. Where there is a lot of stable long-term return that you can expect. Very good profits to be made once you've navigated your way in, and once you've established yourself. There is a lot to be done. So that needs to be further encouraged, including by, as I said, the governments, the high commissions, but also by industry associations, CII and FICCI, these large Indian chambers are doing quite a bit. BCA perhaps needs to, also, come up to the plate, as it were. And we need to have a reactivation of CEOs forums, etc. All of that, I think, is work in progress, efforts being made, and with the good news, as it were, coming out on where the economic relationship between our two countries is headed, perhaps one would find the business also following a little better now than in the past. So that would be both the expectation and the effort.
Absolutely. Both countries have released economic strategy documents, the India Economic Strategy to 2035 and the Australia Economic Strategy. Both offer elaborate roadmaps on opportunities that exist between both countries. How can both countries redefine these ties? What will you want both countries to do differently here? And moving forward on that, what obstacles do you see in the relationship? And what are your ambitions for the Australia-India ties? Quite a few questions, sorry.
No, well, I don't think the ties need to be redefined. The ties need to be further strengthened. They're already, at a very, very comfortable and strong level. But clearly, there's no ceiling to how deep you can go and what more you can do with each other. So that pillar of the ties as such is very, very good. But as I said earlier, what we really need to do is to catalyze the actual business decision makers to do more. Now, with the realization that you do need to diversify, that you do need to find new markets as well as import sources, with also the realization that you need to add value and not just remain, let us say, in the case of Australia, not just remain exporters of primary commodities, but add value to it, with the realization that today you also need more diversified, robust, and resilient supply chains, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, and that has been starkly brought out by the COVID-19 pandemic and the sort of disruptions it caused. All of this lend themselves beautifully to the enhancement or greater engagement of India and Australia in the business sphere, in the sphere of investments, in the sphere of technology partnerships, joint ventures, value addition, creating virtuous supply chains, cycles. All of that is apparent, staring us in the face right now. And we just need actual players to get down and do it, do it faster, do it better. As I said, there is a great effort going on right now, particularly since we entered into our comprehensive strategic partnership. It's a very comprehensive relationship now. We have in a very large number of promising areas. We have high-level working groups and task forces that meet and discuss the way forward. And some of that will, in the months to come, will bear fruit, I'm quite confident.
From a diplomatic, bureaucratic perspective, and of course, looking at your illustrious career experience, is there something Australia should be mindful of when it engages with India in terms of the way in which India builds its bilateral economic ties with other countries, for instance, with Japan, Germany, UK? And can there be lessons for Australian businesses and government to follow in this area?
Well, I should think so. I think each country is unique. Each relationship is unique. How to work and operate in one country can be quite different from another country. And I think certainly in the case of India, that is true. So what I think needs to be learned or appreciated is that there is no one-size-fits-all kind of solution, that India needs to be looked at in its own right, understood the way our environment there is, what we offer, how we do business, what are the important factors for entering into good relationships with counterpart Indian companies. What is it that is important? It's like management 101. You do need to look at India and our environment and our ethos, business culture, etc., in its own right.
I might just touch quickly on the diaspora. The Indian diaspora in Australia, the diaspora across the world, is called the living bridge between both countries. And we've recently started, diaspora diplomacy in many events that we're active in. What can India do more to leverage the potential of the Indian community in Australia to promote its relationship with India, to a higher trajectory of growth?
Well, it's already doing a lot. The diaspora is contributing hugely. And it is not an exaggeration when we do say and speak about it as a living bridge between our two countries. And it's not just the Indians who say it, it's also the Australians who say it. There is this mutual recognition, acknowledgement, and appreciation of the value that the diaspora brings to the larger bilateral relationship. It's fabulous, really, to see the Indian diaspora in Australia, particularly, to be so highly regarded, for their contributions to be so much valued, for, I think, the assimilation or the opportunities for easy assimilation that Australia now provides to Indians, the opportunities that it gives to Indians. All that is fabulous. At the same time, it is wonderful to see that the diaspora, the community members themselves, are well educated. They follow the law. They do not break it. They contribute in very important fields of activity over here. Certain sectors or industries which are vital, perhaps to a significant extent depend on the diasporas and what they bring to it, be it, let's say, the healthcare sector or the IT sector, etc. There's some wonderful stories, and it makes me feel so proud when I see how well the Indian diaspora has done over here. And today, now that their numbers are, they've kind of reached a critical level where they are able, to be an influential voice simply because they happen to be a significant part of the Australian community now. They are Australians, more might be Indian by ethnicity, but they are Australian citizens and important Australian citizens. So they bring in, obviously, the strength of their numbers, the strength of their voice, and it is being heard more and more. I know that. I see the acknowledgement of their value, their importance by Australian politicians. So they are already doing a lot. Again, you asked me what could they do more. Again, I think they're trying this. I know they are. Someone like you does this all the time as well. But again, to change any sort of negative impressions lasting from an older period that might persist in Australia and with the Australians that they meet, be it their employers, be it their employees, be it their business partners, be it their banks, be it their pension funds. We need to sort of spread the story, the Indian story, the growth story, the new India story better.
Absolutely. Mr. Vohra, I know this is still early days for you, but if I can ask you today, and we'd love to have you back with us on a regular occasion throughout your tenure here, but for you at the moment, what are the most defining, significant features of the Australia-India relationships?
Well, the defining feature, of course, is the great trust and belief that the two sides at a government level have in each other and with each other. The comfort that we can talk about anything, discuss anything, support each other's arguments, support each other's positions, assist. So that, of course, is a defining feature. And the other defining feature really is a little more futuristic, which is the promise of greater economic engagement between India and Australia that is there, available, and we need to find ways and means of seizing those opportunities. There could be relationships, there could be supply chains, futuristic, looking to the future, and therefore not just to benefit businessmen and companies, which of course will follow naturally, but also to secure various aspects of your economic future and even of environmental future and future of mankind. There's so many things that India and Australia can bring to the table.
Absolutely. And finally, where do you, and I'm sure you've got some strategies and plans already in play, but where do you see Australia-India ties in the next 5 years? Is it going to be extensive? How extensive is it going to be? How intense is it going to be? And how far and fast do you think we'll get in the next 5 years?
Well, you're asking me to gaze into the crystal ball.
The crystal ball.
So let me try that. Well, in 5 years' time, I do see a free trade agreement already working and operating between our two countries. I see much more investments from Australia into India and vice versa. I see greater mobility of people between India and Australia. I see a much higher degree of physical connectivity between India and Australia, much more travel, tourism, trade, all of that happening. And I see a very, very close, even closer sort of affinity and relationship at the government to government level.
Wonderful. Such a delight to have you on our show today. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. And I do hope that you'll join us again in the future.
I'll be delighted. Yeah, anytime you wish, just give me a shout. And I thank you for this opportunity, as I said, to speak to you and to you through you to your viewers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner.
Bye-bye.